I'm Julie Herman of J. Burt Quilts and Lazy Girl Designs, and welcome back to the Lazy Angle Basics series. Last week, we worked on learning one-step blocks, and we made the beach ball baby quilt. This week, we are going to learn two-step blocks, and we are going to be working on the apple pie table runner. So over the course of the next 3 videos, I'm going to show you how we make the two-step block, how we piece those together into star blocks, and then how we put it all together into a table runner. So let's get started. The first thing that you'll need to do is download your pattern. The apple pie table runner pattern is only available in PDF format through our website. So go ahead and purchase that pattern, and then you can print it or you can view it on your tablet or computer. I've decided to print it, and I printed it double-sided so that I have it here and I can mark it up. I like to have my patterns physically in front of me. So once you have that, it's time to get started on our fabric selection and cutting. Page 3 of the pattern shows you the two-step block that we'll be using here in the apple pie table runner. There's many different two-step blocks, but this is the one that we'll be needing for this project. So we need to decide where our fabrics are going to go in our table runner. We have centers of our stars, we have a border, and we have our star points. So following the directions in the middle of page 3, go ahead and divide your charm squares into 3 piles. You're going to have 3 fabrics that you're going to trim down to be the center of your stars. Then you are going to have a handful that are going to be your border, and the rest are going to be your star points. I've gone ahead and cut my centers and my border rectangles, so I'm just going to go ahead and set them aside. And now I'm going to show you how we cut our star points. So we need left B's and right B's, and the difference is how we are cutting with the ruler. Our right ones are cut with the ruler with the fabric right side up, and our left are cut with the fabric wrong side up. I'll show you how. The directions for what I'm showing you are on page 5 of your pattern. So you're going to go ahead and take a charm square that you want, and half of them are going to create your right B's and half of them are going to create your left B's. And for this one, I want a right B. I'm going to cut that with my fabric right side up and my ruler right side up. So you can see that you can read the name of the ruler, you can see all the numbers. I'm going to go ahead, since we're looking at 4.5 inch shapes, and find my 4.5 inch line, and I'm going to line up my line here. Now, if you know me, I usually work on a solid mat. I usually work on the back, but today I'm using my Sew Tights mat, and I'll show you why. And this mat has light lines on a dark gray, and then the other side is reverse. If you have issues with things slipping and whatnot, this mat system might really work well for you. So I'm going to go ahead and line up my 4.5 and line up my straight line. And then this cutting system comes with these booster magnets. So it comes with a magnetic ruler, but that's a straight ruler, and we need to use our specialty ruler. So these boosters can be placed anywhere, and all of a sudden, they basically create a magnetic jumbo lazy angle ruler. You see, if I push it hard, I can move it, but a gentle touch won't move it, where under normal circumstances, a gentle touch is going to shift your ruler. So I find this very helpful. And you can place them wherever they're not going to be in the way for you to make your cut. So for me, I place 1 there and then 2 kind of on the sides just to hold it in place because it is a larger ruler. And I'm simply going to cut all the way, slide this out of the way, trim this off. And just like that, I have that piece that will end up there in the block. Now I need to cut 1 more. So the easiest way to do that is just rotate this piece 180 degrees. And I will note that I am right-handed, so if you are left-handed, I suggest watching this and then taking your pattern, page 5, and rotating that 180 degrees so that the diagrams line up to how you cut. And if you need additional help with that, please just let me know. So again, got these in place. I'm on my 4.5 inch lines. Trim and trim. And I can put that in my scrap bin. And there we go. So now if I want to go ahead and cut my left pieces, the important part here is we're going to flip the fabric wrong side up. That's how we're going to get our left pieces. So again, we're going to line up our ruler the same way that we just did to cut our rights. We're just using the wrong side of the fabric. So I'm going to line that up, and you'll notice I'm kind of working at an angle here, and if I work straight, sometimes these lines can line up in here and distract me. So I find that if I'm using the line side, I intentionally don't want to be distracted by them, so I make sure that nothing in there is going to refer to the piece because I'm concerned with what the ruler is doing, not the mat. The mat is just the means to safely cut my fabric without damaging whatever other surface I'm on. So trim and trim. There we go. Now we have our left. Rotate this piece around. Line our ruler back up. And trim. And you're going to repeat those steps till you have enough right and left triangle B pieces to create your table runner. So now we're actually going to go back a page in the pattern and we're going to cut the A pieces from our background. So we have a strip here, and the first thing I want to do is trim my selvage off. So I'm going to turn my ruler around and line up the straight part of my ruler here. And again, I'm going to use my magnets. Just helps things to not move around. And trim. And this one time I have to flip my strip around. And now to cut our A pieces, we want all of our fabric right side up because we want right A's for this project. And we want to line up our 4.5 inch A. So our B piece was here, which is smaller, and our A piece is here, which is larger. And the two of them together are going to create a square. So once I have that lined up and that lined up, oops, see, things shift, happens all the time. Once I have them lined up, I'm going to go ahead and use my booster magnets again and trim. And then that is the exact angle for my next piece. I'm simply going to take my ruler and pick it up and rotate it around 180 degrees. And I can move this one out of the way so it's not distracting to you. And I'm now going to use this 4.5 inch line here. So I'm going to line that up and line up that cut angle, and that's lined up there with the top of my ruler. Get my magnets in place and cut. So the magnets are optional. It's not required for this project, but it's just something that I have found helpful, and I always like to share with you when I find tools helpful. So I'm just going to continue down the length of this strip, cutting as many A pieces as I need for my table runner. The piecing for our quilt begins on page 6. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our A pieces and our B pieces and put them together to make a square. So we are going to take this and flip it right sides. Now, you want to make sure that you are not lining it up with your point there and there, because then when you go ahead and open it, it's not going to be a straight line up there. So what you want to do is you want to get it so that you have these tiny little dog ears down here, and that your stitching line is going to go from that valley to that valley. Okay? And it can take some getting used to. You might need to get it up a little bit, down a little bit. I'll show you in detail the machine. But once you find that sweet spot, it works out perfectly and you end up with a nice square. So we're going to get that lined up, head to the machine, and sew our scant 1/4 inch seam. I'm over here at my machine, and I have my machine set up to a scant 1/4 inch. If you've never done a sew along with me before and you're not familiar with scant 1/4 inch, it has to do with accounting for the amount of space the thread is going to take in the seam allowance. It gives you a more accurate block than what is considered a true 1/4 inch. So if you're not familiar with that, I suggest you take a couple 1.5 inch strips, sew them together with a scant 1/4 inch seam, press your seams open, and then measure. If this is exactly 1 inch, you've got your scant 1/4 inch, great. If this is under, your seam allowance is too generous. If this is more than 1 inch, your seam allowance is too small. So the idea here is to get our seam allowance so that our pieces will be exactly mathematically what we want them to be, which in this case is we want to end up with 4.5 inch squares. So go ahead, test your 1/4 inch and your scant 1/4 inch till you get that perfect. Then go ahead and line up your A and your B. So you have your dog ears down here, and we want to sew from valley to valley, and we want that to be our scant 1/4 inch. So if you're like this and you're going to be starting up there, you know that this is not lined up right. So you need to get this lined up so that you are sewing from valley to valley in your perfect scant 1/4 inch seam. And I don't backstitch at the beginning or the end. And when I'm not making a test block, I go ahead and I do chain piece, and I'll just sew all my A's to all my B's, so forth and so on. Now that we have this sewn, it's time to go ahead and press this seam. And I find it best to press this open so that it lays as flat as possible for the next step. If you're not used to pressing open, I suggest you try, and then if you're extremely unhappy with it, you can always go back to doing something else. You can try some test blocks first if it makes you nervous. So go ahead first and open it with my fingers, and then I like to have my heat-resistant stiletto nearby. This part is silicone so that I don't have my fingers anywhere near the end of the iron, because if this touches the iron, it doesn't burn my fingers wood. And what's important is we're going to press, not iron. Pressing is up and down. Ironing is pushing. We don't want to push. We have bias here. We don't want to stretch things. So we want to make sure that we are pressing and not ironing. And we are going to go ahead and repeat that process with all of our A to B pieces. And again, if you're unsure, let's go ahead and make some sample blocks first before you jump on into your fabric for your table runner. Once we have our blocks pressed, we need to go ahead and recut our blocks. And this is what we're going to do to be able to add our left B. And the directions for this are in the middle of page 6. Now, if you ever get a little confused as to where you're putting your next piece, because there are an unlimited number of blocks, there's different ways you could do this. For the design that we're doing, we want it here. I suggest you take your next piece and lay it on top, and that's kind of a good reminder too, that's the part I want to be cutting off, so you don't accidentally cut the wrong part of your block off. But I do have diagrams on page 6, in the middle of page 6, and what it shows you to do is to take this block and flip it so that the wrong side is up. And the reason we're going to do this is because we have a left B, so we need to cut a left A. And we cut our left pieces with our wrong side up. So we're going to take this block and we're going to line our ruler up under 4.5. Because that is the magic number for this quilt. All of our blocks are going to be 4.5. And so we're going to line this up. And again, I'm going to use my magnets to hold things in place. But before I do, I want to show you a couple double checks. So in addition to having your 4.5, right here you have a dashed line. That line is your seam allowance. So where it turns here should line up on this seam. So if it's all the way over here, that's a red flag. If it's over here, that's a red flag. Where it turns here should line up on that seam. And right here, our seam allowance of our 4.5 should also line up on this seam. So those are two double checks to yourself to kind of make sure, am I in the right place? Did I line things up properly? Always good to measure twice, cut once, double check everything. So I'm going to go ahead and hold that in place and trim. And so now I have a left A that will perfectly line up with my left B. And you don't have the point here, which we have in our A's when we cut them initially from yardage, just because of the fact that we already have a square block, so we don't have that point. That's okay. And you will see there's more white up here. If you're familiar with my Jaybird Quilts rulers, you're used to that that shouldn't be there. This is not a 60-degree project, so things are not the same as they are with the Jaybird rulers and whatnot. So that is correct. So I'm going to go ahead and take this and put it right sides. And I'm going to kind of ignore that dog ear. And if that one confuses you, you can trim it off. And I'm going to create matching dog ears down here with these two. And I'm going to sew from the valley here to the valley here. And I'll show you that at the machine as well. Now that I have my recut left A, I can go ahead and sew on my left B to complete my star points. And you will notice that I always have a leader ender. If I'm not chain piecing, I always want to make sure there's something under my machine so I don't get that nest of threads at the beginning when I'm sewing. That's very important and very helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and line this up just like I did the other ones. And I'm going to have my dog ear down there, and I want to make sure that that valley is a scant 1/4 inch from my raw edges, and same thing up here. And if this is visually getting in your way, that dog ear, you can go ahead and trim that off. It doesn't bother me, but you can always kind of push it back to make sure that that valley is correct. So once you have that lined up perfectly, I'm going to go ahead and rotate it around so that I can sew my scant 1/4 inch seam nice and slow. Again, I am not backstitching at the beginning or the end. And if you feel like you are having slipping issues, a stiletto can come in handy. Kind of just works as an extra finger that can get nice and tight in there without sewing on yourself. Hold your pieces in place. Now that I have my left BP sewn, it is time to go ahead and press this seam. And so again, I'm going to flip it over to the back just as I did with the first one, and use my heat resistant stiletto. And again, pressing is up and down. We don't want to iron, we want to press. And there we go. So this is called a two-step block because this was step 1 and this was step 2. So I hope you're beginning to understand in our Lazy Angle Basics series why we call things a 1-step, a 2-step, and so forth and so on, and we're going to continue to build our skill set. I'm going to continue to piece together each of my Lazy Angle 2-step blocks. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to like it, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. If you have not yet signed up for the Sew Along emails, you can do so in the link provided below. I will be back here in the next video to show you how to take these 2-step blocks and put them together into larger star blocks to continue making our table runner. See you soon.